Hello and welcome to the War Films podcast. This is our 7th episode. In this one we're looking at the 1976 film The Eagle Has Landed. I'm Murray Ewing, I'm a comic artist and writer, and I'm doing these podcasts with my brother Murray.
Hello, I'm Murray, and I'm a writer. I've got a book out at the moment called The Fantasy Reader.
Okay, so this film, the main thing about this is it stars Michael Caine, and he has been in 4, including this one, 4 of our films.
Yes.
I mean, that's including the Adventure Films podcast, which was the series we did before this war film. So he was in our last one we did, which was Zulu. We did that Bridge Too Far, which we've also looked at for the War Films podcast. And in our Adventure Films podcast, he was in the excellent The Man Who Would Be King.
Yes.
And Zulu was 1964. The Man Who Would Be King was 1975. And then we've got this one, The Eagle Has Landed, 1976. And A Bridge Too Far was 1977. So we've got, let's call that a hat trick for Michael Caine. I'm not sure if he's the actor who's been in the most films we've looked at.
There might be some bit part actor who's in the part.
Yeah, there are a few. There's a few Anthonys, like Anthony Quayle and Anthony Quinn, that popped up a few times. Yeah. And in fact, Anthony Quayle is in this one as well.
Yeah.
So yes, it's a good cast. It's one of those classic war films. Have you seen this before we looked at it for this podcast?
I think this is the film from the series of what we're looking at, which I've seen the most. I'm most familiar with.
Yes, yeah. It's one of those. It's very easy. It's not a politically charged film like perhaps like the Platoon we looked at.
It happened here, yeah.
Yeah, it happened here, or even Parts of Glory.
Yeah.
It's in fact, this is one of those that could easily fit into the Adventure Films podcast because it's pretty much completely fictional.
Mm. It doesn't really refer to the wider war, apart from the fact that there's got to be a war going on.
No.
It's not like a key moment. I mean, it would be if the mission succeeded, obviously.
Yes. And in fact, that's a good point. If you haven't seen this film and you're thinking you'd like to sit down and enjoy it, perhaps do that before you listen to the rest of this podcast, because there will be spoilers.
Yes.
And this film has got a couple of twists and turns in its plot, so we are going to spoil this film. So yes, 1976, based on the novel by Jack Higgins.
Yeah, the novel came out in 1975.
Right.
Which is odd considering the film came out in 1976 and they probably took a while to make it. So I think actually the rights to it were bought in 1974. So they probably got it. I think what happened, quite a lot of studios would read all of the upcoming books before they were published.
Yes.
Looking for stories and so on to buy. So that's probably what happened with that. Jack Higgins at the time wasn't a big successful author. This was his breakthrough novel.
Oh, okay. And that was a pseudonym as well, wasn't it, Jack Higgins? That
was it?
Wasn't his real name. Sorry, I haven't got his real name to hand. Yeah. What it was, but that's certainly the name he's known under.
Yeah. I mean, it's a good thriller writer's name, isn't it?
Yeah.
Jack Higgins. He even wrote a sequel to it, actually, in 1991, The Eagle Has Flown. But
right,
we
yes.
That later.
Yeah. Okay, so what's the basic premise of the plot?
The good thing about this, I thought, was that it sort of reverses the Guns of Navarone, which is our side going in doing a mission.
The goodies.
On enemy territory.
Yeah.
Here we've got the Germans doing a mission on home territory.
Right,
From a very English perspective, I say.
Yeah, and that's probably the main interest of the film, isn't it?
Mm.
There's another film called Went the Day Well, I think.
Based on a
Graham
Greene short story.
Yeah.
1942.
Yeah, so while the war was still going on, so very much a propaganda exercise, probably.
Have you seen it?
No, have you?
Yeah, I saw it a couple of months ago. In fact, driven by my interest in war films from this podcast. It's interesting. I mean, it's got similar things because it's a German invasion of a small English village, so it's got a lot of similar scenes and ideas.
In that, don't they round up the villagers and keep them in a church as well?
Yes, yeah.
I mean, do you think is there any argument of plagiarism at all, or is it totally not? Do you think that's
difficult to tell?
It just, when I read the plot, it seems so similar. And in the book of The Eagle Has Landed, there's a framing device where the author, who I don't know if it's supposed to be Jack Higgins himself, finds a grave in an English village that says, here lies however many 16 German paratroopers.
Oh, right.
And so he then finds out from the villagers the story, and then that's the story that's told. And I believe it's the same in went the day well.
Could be. I can't remember
grave.
Too many details.
I think again they see a grave in an English village graveyard, and
the one thing I do remember about Went the Day Well is it felt a bit more hard hitting. It was on the one hand it was more patriotic because of course it was during the war, but the violence, though less explicit, seemed more shocking because you had. It started off with all these jolly English characters, like the postmistress at the local shop.
Right.
And I think one of them gets killed in quite a nasty way, and one of them has to kill a German. And you're thinking, this isn't a soldier killing a German, but just a civilian.
So they're holed up in the church, and they're trying to get the message out to the British authorities that there's Germans.
In fact, I think there's at one point children get out of the church to try and get the message out, and that's something that's the opposite of The Eagles Landed, which shows the Germans saving a child.
Yes, yeah.
I can't remember what happens in Went the Day Well, so this isn't going to be a spoiler, but I seem to remember very much feeling as though a child could be shot by a German.
Right. I'm going to have to seek that out and watch it, because just reading about it sounded very good.
It's a good film.
So the basic plot is that it's the good part of the film. In a way, is the setup, the planning.
Yeah.
A lot of these war films we've looked at have been. I think we've said this before. There's the sort of mission is proposed, and then you see the planning stages, and that's the build-up.
Yeah.
So the first half of the film might be the planning, with the maps and the pointers and spies bringing in information.
Yeah.
Like A Bridge Too Far, for instance, and Guns of Navarone to some degree.
Yeah.
And then the second half of the film is, what's supposed to happen.
Yes.
Is then that all sort of going wrong, and then whether it succeeds or not. Of course, the thing about this is it's a plot to try and kidnap Churchill and take him back to Germany. Well, we know that didn't succeed. Yeah. It's kind of spoiled already in a way. But the film's still intriguing. You still want to watch it to see what happens.
I mean, it's set in 1943, which is towards the end of the war. The Germans are feeling desperate.
Yeah.
They're not quite admitting they're losing, but some of them get the feeling as though they are.
Yeah.
And it's put forward as a wild idea.
Yes.
Because right at the beginning, the Germans rescue Mussolini from some mountain retreat.
Yeah.
And that gets the idea that
which did happen.
Yeah. They can go into enemy territory and get a key person. So someone obviously makes why don't we get Winston Churchill? That'll end the war. Yeah. Or at least someone says, make us be able to negotiate a peace.
Yes, that's right.
Which, of course, no one would suggest to Hitler. But so it starts off as a feasibility study into could we do this? So
the main character who does that is...
Robert Duvall's character.
Well, I was going to say Anthony Quayle.
Oh, Admiral Canaris.
And he's been in two of our films, as we said, Guns of Navarone, and Lawrence of Arabia was the other one in our adventure films. He thinks it's absolutely ridiculous. He's a rationalist.
Yeah.
He sees the war as being lost and is kind of preparing for that. There's quite a good scene where he's describing the meeting in Hitler's boardroom, and he describes each of the characters. Hitler completely mad and ranting and raving, and then rational, and then stomping his feet, and Bormann just sitting in the corner quietly watching everyone. So he thinks it's ridiculous, and he's asked Robert Duvall's character, Colonel Radl, to look into it.
Yeah, he's the one who has to carry out the feasibility study.
It's quite funny with Anthony Quayle, because although he puts on a very slight German accent, you can, if you listen really hard, you can just about hear a slight German inflection to it. He sounds really British because he's Anthony Quayle. Yeah, he doesn't really do accents, obviously.
Well, actually, that's something I noticed in a later scene with Donald Pleasance. I thought he's not doing a German accent. I wondered if all the British didn't do the German accents, but the American actors like Robert Duvall did because they felt they should.
I don't know. I thought Donald Pleasance did.
Oh, maybe I didn't.
To some degree. I mean, Donald Pleasance appears a little later, but as you brought him up, he plays Himmler.
Yes,
and I think he's brilliant.
Yeah,
he's slightly mad. He's when he's putting forward an idea, it almost continues into a slightly mad cackle each time. He can't help himself.
The thing I thought about Donald Pleasance doing Himmler is, of course, people of Donald Pleasance's generation would, of course, know people like Himmler and hate them because they were fighting in the war against them. And he probably would have really loved to basically take the mickey out of someone like Himmler by making him mad. I mean, he might have been mad anyway, but
I'm sure he was. Yeah.
I bet he loved the part. But
I think And, Pleasance was originally a conscientious objector in World War II.
Oh right.
But then he changed his stance and joined the RAF. He was shot down as a prisoner of war in Germany. So he had quite a...
And he was in The Great Escape, which is another...
Of course, yes.
1963.
Why, I could even see that needle over there. He was the one who was going blind, wasn't he? And desperate to go, yeah. Well, he played Blofeld as well. Yes. So maybe there's a little bit of... When was that? You Only Lived Twice. So that was before. That was 1967.
Yeah.
So that was before. And The Great Escape was 63. So quite a while before... Eagles landed. So yes, the feasibility study.
Yeah.
Robert Duvall's good, isn't he? He's he's a bit of a sort of he's a central pivoting character in the film, but very much a sort of a calm in the eye of the storm that it all surrounds. When Canaris says, this is ridiculous, but you've still got to do the feasibility study just so we can get it off our backs. He kind of blanks Canaris a little bit, because there's Canaris going on about Hitler and he doesn't acknowledge or agree with him. He just says, okay, so anyway, about this feasibility study, let's get on with the job. He's a veteran of the Soviet campaign. He's got an eye patch and his arm, I guess a false arm. And when he does the feasibility study, synchronicity, through synchronicity, some information comes in from a German spy in Britain called Starling that lets them know that Churchill is going to be at this country manor house in Norfolk, not far from the Studley Constable, which doesn't exist, I don't think, does it?
In Norfolk.
But not far from the East Anglian coast, which the Germans could get to. So suddenly, this could work, he thinks, and actually sets the wheels in motion.
In a way, it could only work if we take it seriously and do it quickly. So there's no time to say, shall we do it? So really, he takes it into his own hands from that point on. And
Canaris, Anthony Quayle, gets wind that this is being taken seriously and sort of tells him to drop it. But unfortunately for him, Himmler is also, who's probably the motivating force behind it. I don't think Hitler actually knows anything about it, does he? He urges him on.
In fact, he gives him a letter signed by Hitler, supposedly, saying, whatever this man Radl asks for, give him, because he's acting directly
no matter
on
what your
my
rank.
orders.
But that, I think, turns out to be a forgery from Himmler. And later, when we see that the mission is failing, they wash their hands of Radl, don't they? And as he says, I was measured for my casket months ago, as in this was never going to... he's just been used. That's the point. Okay, so we've got a bit ahead there. But we meet Michael Caine, Steiner. Steiner. And he's the head of a crack troop of paratroopers who have been in the thick of 5 or 6 almost impossible missions.
Commando raids,
He's won every sort of, cross under the sun. But he's a good German.
Yes. We know he's a good German because when we see him... other Nazis are rounding up Jewish civilians. A woman escapes, runs straight into Kurt Steiner's arms, and he's all for saving her. Which is, of course, against the orders of the SS. He's clashing against the SS. He does save her, but then she gets shot.
He puts her on a train, but as it's going off, she gets shot. Because, of course... I think... I don't know, I haven't read the book, but reading the summary of the book, it doesn't say she gets shot. I wonder if she managed to escape.
Anyway, so Steiner is... Steiner, I'm doing the German thing. Is basically up for a court-martial, and he says, would you... this has nothing to do with my men. My men are just being loyal to me. But, of course, he's up against a nasty SS man who
sees that that's his weak spot. Says, right, well, your men are going as well. If that's what you want, then I'm not going to give it to you. Because how dare he...
I have nothing for or against Jews personally. But I've seen too many good men die for cause. To watch a young girl be killed for sport.
Sturmbannführer Stab was doing his duty.
He reminds me of something that I occasionally pick up on my shoe in the gutter. Very unpleasant on a hot day. And if you had the dubious honor of commanding this senseless slaughter, I'd advise you to keep him downwind at all times. That is, of course, if you can tell the difference anymore.
So basically, we've got Steiner under arrest, but it means he's available for...
Well, he's court-martialed and he's put on a penal colony in Alderney, which is one of the Channel Islands.
Yeah. Occupied by the Germans.
Yeah, which was the sole occupation of Britain by the Germans, wasn't it?
Yes, yeah. They're basically using him on suicide missions, aren't they?
Yeah, so he started with like 30 men, and by the time Rawdle gets to him, he's down to 16.
Yeah. So obviously he's presented with this mission and he said, well, it's a chance to save your men.
Yeah.
So basically he's got no choice.
We meet the other main character, Liam Devlin.
Yes.
Played by Donald Sutherland.
Yes.
And he is an Irishman.
Yeah.
Who is lecturing at a Berlin university.
Yeah.
But he's an IRA man.
Yeah.
And he's sort of, the enemy...
Yeah, my enemy's enemy is my friend.
Enemy's enemy.
Yeah, he wants a united Ireland, and of course the British are in the way of that. His character, Michael Caine, was originally he was offered the part of Devlin.
Oh right.
Michael Caine didn't want to play an IRA supporter.
Yeah.
So then it was offered to Richard Harris.
Okay.
An actual Irishman.
Yeah.
Who shortly after made an appearance at an actual IRA fundraiser. So he was immediately dropped.
Right.
And so then they brought in Donald Sutherland.
Right. Who's a kind of a cheeky Irishman.
Yeah.
Or Irishman.
Yes.
In that he's a bit... Well, he's pretty cliched, isn't he, for an Irishman?
Yeah.
But there's these little sympathetic touches. So with Michael Caine, we get this key scene where he tries to save a Jewish girl from being taken to the concentration camp and fails.
Yeah.
And with Donald Sutherland, he quite clearly says he doesn't want to blow up civilians.
Yes. Yeah.
He's much rather he wants to target directly the British army, the military, or the authorities. So he's not. We don't see him as just. In fact, that's with all the Germans. The German side.
Yeah.
They're a bit more subtle than perhaps some of the British and other characters in this film.
Yeah. Well, of course, we've got to be made to... I don't know if identify is the right word, but get behind each of the characters.
Yeah.
And a lot of them have got are doing dubious things, but they've all got to have a pure motive, really, in order for us to get behind them.
Yeah.
To make us see them as heroes.
Yeah. So Devlin was... He's a bit of in some ways, he's a bit of an odd character in this because it's not totally clear why they need him.
Yeah.
Particularly. Especially if they're already looking for someone like Steiner. I mean, Steiner is someone that Colonel Rawdle needs to find someone who'd be perfect for this job. So with his assistant, they're looking through loads of files and eventually they choose Steiner. And I can't remember now why they choose Devlin, apart from he's done some work for them before, gone into Ireland. He's based on a real person, apparently, called Frank Ryan, who was an IRA man who fought in the Spanish Civil War, was against the fascists, I think.
Yeah. I
think that's right. And anyway, eventually he was taken prisoner, I think went to Italy, and then ended up with the Germans who said that we'll help you if you help us.
Yes, yeah.
And there was historically some actual collaboration between the Germans and the IRA.
Yeah.
They shared intelligence.
Yeah.
But I think so remember when with It Happened Here, we talked about Operation Sea Lion, which was going to be was Hitler's plan to invade Britain, which never happened, of course.
Yeah.
It Happened Here is a film about
if it did happen.
If that had occurred, the German occupation of the British Isles. So once Operation Sea Lion was obvious it wasn't going to happen, the Germans kind of lost interest in Ireland because the only reason they were interested, really, they weren't that interested in Ireland or the Irish cause. They were interested in mainland Britain and England particularly. And once England became, obviously wasn't going to happen for them, they lost interest in the Irish. But before that, there was collaboration.
Yes, there wasn't an ideological bond. It was just, as you say, my enemy's enemy is my friend. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, so Devlin's going to go in and sort of be their man on the ground. Of course, they've already got a spy.
Yeah, we know Starling.
Who we don't know who that is at the moment.
Yes.
Again, historically, it's quite interesting because I believe the British were very successful in rooting out pretty much all German spies in the UK.
I saw this brilliant documentary recently about a British man who was arrested for breaking into safes. He was basically a criminal.
Right.
And was held on one of the Guernsey Islands when the Germans invaded. And so he found himself a prisoner of the Germans,
Right.
offered to spy for them. They thought, great, sent him to England, where he immediately handed himself in and acted as a double agent. I mean, what he did was quite good, but what a life of adventure he had.
I think that's the kind of story of Germans tried to get loads of spies in.
Yeah.
But so many of them were just incompetent. They were caught so quickly.
Yes, yeah.
And what the British did was they had this thing called, I think, the double cross system, where they'd say, right, you're either going to be shot or you can spy for us.
Yeah.
And quite a few of them did.
Yeah.
And of course the British had the Enigma machine by then, so they knew who was getting information from the Germans. So yes, this starling would have been a rare bird. Of course it's possible.
Yeah.
It's fictional, so you need it in the story.
Well, we later learned their motivation. So and then there's a pub fight
when they go to Albany to get Steiner.
Yeah.
He likes to rub people up the wrong way.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a cheeky Irishman. He's his own man. He's an individual. Yes, he's working for the Germans, but it seems like he just as quick change sides if it suited his...
Yeah, he's basically after himself.
He's
the Irish cause.
Well, he's supposedly, but do you actually feel he's strongly wedded to that? I don't.
Yeah, it's difficult to tell.
He's a bit of an imp, isn't he, in this film? He's quite funny.
Yeah.
But I don't think... Liam Devlin, the character, was used in several Jack Higgins books.
Really?
He was a recurring character, as well as... So there was this, and then The Eagle Has Flown, the sequel, but also he was in some other stories. And I'm sure in the novel, he's a lot more rounded character than here. I mean, the worst bit of this film, because it's by no means perfect, is the Liam Devlin and Molly Pryor, who's played by Jenny Agutter.
Yeah.
The relationship between them is just... I think it's a slight embarrassment. It's kind of like the Anakin Skywalker, Padme of 1970s war films.
Yeah.
It's just, later in the film, Jenny Agutter, who's an 18-year-old girl in the village of, I forgot what it's called, Studley Constable, falls in love with Liam Devlin almost on sight.
Yes.
For no... I mean, they haven't even... I don't understand how they fall in love, but they do. I can only imagine that in the book this is really well done and develops over the length of a novel, and in the film they kind of didn't quite fulfill the intention of putting it in properly.
Yeah,
and so it's kind of a leftover plot device that's limping along. Yeah, to fill out the film a bit. But
you do have to believe in it to follow what happens.
Yeah, but it doesn't. You can't believe in it.
I didn't think it was that bad because, for one thing, she's young.
Yes.
Two, there aren't going to be any probably men of her age in the village because they're all out fighting.
Well, there's Arthur.
Yeah, I don't know what he's doing.
Well, he's not her age. Yeah. No, you're right.
Yeah.
You're right.
So, I mean, and we can't tell if it's just an infatuation.
Yes. Yeah, although that's been very simplistic about 18-year-old girls on behalf of the film, I think. I mean, sure, naive. And here comes this Irish, man of the world, seems to know everything, and she falls for him. It's certainly possible. But then I think it could have been done better.
Yeah.
I mean, that's one thing about this film. I think, on reflection, if I was redoing the 10... I might not include The Eagle Has Landed, although I really love it as a good old adventure film. There are better quality war films that could replace this one.
Yeah, When the Day Will.
Well, there's loads. I mean, when I announced this on Twitter that I was doing this, there were quite a few tweets saying, I hope you want to include this and this. And they're all fantastic films, but of course you can only choose 10. And we weren't just going for the 10 best or favourite. We were trying to have a bit of a spread, although a lot of them were World War II films. We wanted a bit of variety in them.
It's funny, this was probably the sort of film I was thinking of when I said war films, because, I don't know, it just seems so much like the classic that I had in mind.
The big one like that, The Guns of Navarone is like that, and Where Eagles Dare, the other Eagle film, is also like that. It's just kind of frivolous war adventure with not really any politics in it.
I read somewhere a little bit of criticism about the director, John Sturges. It was his last film. Yeah. He'd done The Great Escape in 1963 and Magnificent Seven in 1960. So he'd done some good films. Yeah. I think someone said, "Oh, this film was saved by the editor." I can't remember who the editor is, but
because Sturgis just wanted to do it and leave because he'd pretty much retired by then. I think he just wanted the money, and he wasn't involved in the editing process at all.
Right.
I think it was Michael Caine who said that he wasn't interested. But I noticed also one of the producers was David Niven Jr.
Yes, son
whose father was in the Guns of Navarone that we did. Okay, so we've got our group together. They go and get Steiner, and he agrees.
Yeah.
Yes, Donald Sutherland gets punched out of the pub in a jolly old. Once they've proven each other. This is men, isn't it? They got to fight, and then yay, we're buddies, and so now they're all together in this project.
And so the next thing is to drop Devlin into England.
Actually, it seems like they're going to drop him into Ireland, and then he makes his way to...
Oh, right. I'd have thought that would be quite difficult.
Well, at one point in the film, he says, before he knows what the thing is, he says, you can't drop me into Ireland again, because he thinks he's going to do another mission for them in Ireland. He says, I'll be picked up within half an hour. Yeah. So obviously he's known. But I'm sure in this, they say they're going to drop him in Southern Ireland, and... then he's going to make his way...
Oh, well, maybe he does.
To,
to East Anglia.
So Starling, who is... the character is Joanna Gray, played by Jean Marsh. She gets him a job as the Marsh warden. Yeah. I mean, I wonder if that's a bit stereotypically Irish as well. So he sort of ends up working in bogs or something, I don't know. But he's a bit... top of the morning to you. Yeah. He's very much a bit like that. Okay, so wherever he lands, we see him walking across a field of cows.
Yeah, which follow him.
Yeah, the two of them follow him, German spies, probably. This is the German spy effort. And he gets this job. I didn't fully understand. So Jean Marsh, Joanna Gray, Mrs. Gray, is she placed there already and comes with this information, or does she also... managed to get herself placed into Studley Constable?
Well, she says later that her motivation, anyway, which is that her mother is Afrikaans, died in a British concentration camp.
But during the Boer War?
Yeah. But I think she's pretty much established at the village, so I don't think the Germans placed her there.
It's not exactly central intelligence, is it?
That's true. But somehow she's got in touch with them, and I think maybe this is something that was never addressed, Yeah. Somehow she's been feeding them information.
There's just a few... This is another one of those things that you have to swallow hard just to accept that if she's a German spy and in this village in Norfolk, I suppose it's possible, but it's not...
The thing that got me thinking of it is if they've got a German spy in the village, why do they need Devlin there? Because what does Devlin do?
Yeah.
He marks the beach where they're going to drop, and that's it. Because at one point he says, right, my job's done, and he drives off. And I think, well, what have you done? He's wandered around.
It's a very good point. Yeah. Again, I think it'd be interesting to read the novel, where I'm sure it's a lot more well worked out, hopefully anyway. So I mean, but that's all good parts of the film, is all the build up, and I think it's very good. It's the usual stuff, of course. Yeah. But the machinations behind the scenes are good with Himmler and Canaris. Yeah. The two authorities. I mean, obviously Himmler's very much senior. Yeah. Slightly mad, and I think it's interesting because he wants to. He's like a puppy to Hitler. He just wants to please him. He wants to bring him Churchill.
Yes, he wants to
say, look what I've done. And when it fails, of course, he knows it will be an absolute disaster. Yeah. And the Germans, losing the war, have got to be... They've got to... Because, right, this is a major spoiler. At the end, Colonel Radl gets shot by firing squad because he's left out to dry, as if he was doing it all on his own, because Himmler washes his hands off him. Yeah. Canaris told him he shouldn't do it. And of course, when they don't want to admit that they did this, when it comes to negotiations with Britain, they want to say, oh, this was a rogue German. Of course we wouldn't have done that, you know. So it's terrible. But I think that's a really good aspect of the film, the way that works.
Well, one thing about this film is, even though there is an actionful ending, most of it's about character, isn't it? People being put in situations. I mean, once you've got spies and so on, it's a lot about treachery, so it's about characters' motivations and so on. And so there's a lot of interesting character stuff. You don't really notice the lack of action, I don't think.
Yeah. Okay, so let's get into the action.
Yes.
So last things Devlin's flown off. In fact, there's a pretty funny scene where he says, how do I get out of this aircraft? And the pilot says, undo your strap, I'll turn upside down, open your window and you'll fall out. Which is pretty much how a lot of these things works, I think. And
before that, we have a rather obvious prefiguring of something later in the plot where there's a dog barks at him. And
isn't that a little bit laboured as well?
Yeah. And the weird thing is so Devlin does this thing, waving his hand and whistling, and the dog calms down, showing he's got this Irishman's, link with
magic.
Dogs. But then, when he gets to England, he does the same thing again, which means he didn't really have to do it.
Because we see it 3 times.
Yeah.
First with the German dog, then with Marsh's dog, and then later when he actually needs it, when 2 Alsatians are sent in by the Americans, who then and then those 2 dogs become his pets. He goes off with them. Anyway, that's a little bit odd and perhaps implausible that, control any dog. Yeah. He's got the shield of controlling any dog.
So the plan is, though, that he goes over, marks the beach so that the Germans can paratroop down there, Michael Caine's men, and they're going to be dressed as Polish soldiers.
Yes.
But a point is made, Michael Caine's character makes the point that they're wearing German uniforms under the Polish ones. Because they're not spies. Yes. And they don't want to be treated as spies if they're captured.
Which I guess could mean they could be shot.
Yeah.
Whereas if they're treated as enemy combatants, soldiers, I guess, then the Geneva Convention... Well, actually, I don't know if the Geneva Convention was in there. Yeah. But, certain rules come into play.
I mean, I took it to be a point of honour, saying, we're not doing this as a sneaky thing. We're commandos. Right. We're doing a mission.
Okay, maybe that's more right. In the book... from what I read, that was Himmler's idea.
Oh, right.
Oddly enough, which doesn't fit in with the film.
Yeah. And one good thing is it's sort of making fun of the English treating all foreigners the same.
Yeah.
Because Michael Caine's character was educated in England, I think they say, so he's got a good accent. But the others are going to obviously sound German. Right. And probably English villagers will think German and Polish sound the same.
But luckily, they all speak Polish.
Yeah.
Or at least, maybe they don't all.
Well, the ones who are given... say who they are. Well, of course, don't we meet them first on the border of Poland?
Well, that's where the Jews are being rounded up. They're going through Poland because they're clearing out the ghettos, aren't they?
Yeah, Michael Caine's character says, I thought we defeated the Polish army.
That's right.
What are we still...
So in they go. So that's a key point. They land, they go in. Of course, there's more spies involved or more subterfuge because before they arrive, Devlin takes delivery of some Polish army
vehicles.
Which who are these guys in the night?
They're IRA members.
Oh, are they?
Because I read somewhere, I think it's on the IMDb trivia page,
right,
that they speak in Irish.
Oh, Gaelic.
And it's an actual translation of what they're saying.
Oh, okay. Because I wondered if they were Polish, so that's how they got hold of. Okay, that clears that up. That makes Devlin a little bit more useful again.
Yeah, actually, you're right. Yeah, that is true.
I don't know if it's enough quite to answer all the questions about him, but it's not bad.
Of course, by this point, we've already started the meeting between Devlin and Molly and Arthur.
Yeah, Arthur is the village idiot. No, he's not. He's the one he's got designs on Molly, and perhaps she's led him on a bit. We don't know, but Arthur immediately identifies Devlin as a potential rival in her affections.
Do they have the fight here?
They have a fight a bit later, don't they?
Yeah, you're right.
Because there's this scene where Devlin follows Molly on her horse.
Oh, yes.
She's a free spirit. She's got and there's a little scene in the dunes.
Yes.
Which is really where... I don't know, that's so confusing, that scene. That I just didn't understand it. That's why I think it's so truncated from the novel and just shoved into the film.
I wondered if that was supposed to make us feel sympathetic with Devlin, because he doesn't just seduce her.
Yeah.
Well,
she says quite a shocking thing. For an 18-year-old, you wouldn't kick me out of bed on a wet Saturday night or whatever.
But she might have just been provocative.
She's quite forward, isn't she?
Yeah, particularly for the 1940s. I mean,
or perhaps we're just quite naive. So anyway, that's I presume where they fall in love.
Of course, another character has been set up. I think this is jumping around a bit.
That's fine.
When Devlin is introduced to the vicar, Father Verica. We also meet Father Verica's sister, Pamela, played by Judy Geeson, who I noted is also in this year played. She was in Carry On England in uniform as well.
Oh, okay. What's Carry On England? Is that a war?
Yeah,
I don't remember that one.
It was one of the later ones, which wasn't. It didn't have many of the regulars in.
Yeah.
Okay. It was about a platoon, a mixed platoon of men and women.
Right. It's hilarious already.
But of course, she set up because she's got an American boyfriend.
Yes.
Boyfriend in the American Army.
Yeah.
Who also sets up another character played by Larry Hagman.
Yeah.
Who's in command of the local American base.
So that's not relayed by Starling to the Germans. That's a complete shock to them when they get there.
Yes,
The sister turns up with Captain Clark.
That's it, yeah.
And he says, "Oh, we didn't know there were Polish here." And Steiner says, "Oh, we didn't know the Americans are here."
Yeah.
Where are you? We're 8 miles down the road. And he says, "Out of interest, how strong is your company?" And he tells them, "We're a platoon, a company, or whatever." There is a good scene where Devlin meets the vicar. That's where he punches Arthur around. It's quite a good little fight scene, isn't it? Quite satisfying.
Yeah.
Okay, so the soldiers. Let's get to the bit now with it. So they're in the village. By the way, it's a lovely village, isn't it? It's that ideal English countryside village, just as you'd want it to be in 1940s rural Britain, where the war hasn't quite.
Well, there's the feeling of this is what we're defending, this is what we're fighting for,
right?
And this is what's most at risk.
Yeah.
Which maybe I wonder why these films tend to centre on the church. Because it's a symbol of community. Certainly at the time. I mean, it'd be in a village. It'd be the one place where they would gather the people, I suppose.
Absolutely, yeah. And the vicar is the sort of head of the community.
Yes. So they ask him permission.
I mean, there is a manor, and the lord of the manor, I can't remember his name. He's away.
Yes.
It's just the staff.
Yeah.
So it consists of a nurse and a butler and a cook or something when they come into the church.
But Steiner asks Father Verica's permission to carry out manoeuvres in the village. So he's acknowledged as the sort of the leader.
3 Polish paratroopers, huh?
Yes, that's right, Captain.
Well, listen, we got a couple Polish guys in our outfit. Maybe your men would like to meet them sometime.
Yes, maybe a little later if it's not too far. Where exactly are you staying, Captain?
Well, we're about 8 miles up the road at Meltham House.
Ah, Meltham House. What sort of strength would you have there?
Well, we're just a company now.
Ah, Meltham House. I'll make a point to remember that.
And that's where we get to probably one of the best scenes in the film. Yeah. So they're doing their manoeuvres, and all the children are watching, and one of them falls into the water, and
there's a water wheel.
That's right.
She's going to get dragged under the water. Now, the water mill is the same as appeared on the cover of Black Sabbath's first album.
No,
yes,
really?
Yes.
I love that fact. Fantastic.
The actual wheel they used was added for the film, but
right.
It's an actual water mill.
Oh wow, that's brilliant. Okay.
But yeah, as you say, one of the children falls in the water, and one of the German soldiers
instinctively, there's no us versus them.
Jumps in to save her, does save her, but is himself tangled in the wheel, killed.
Yeah.
And when he comes up, it's obvious that he's wearing a German uniform.
Yeah, so his Polish uniform's torn away, and there is the German uniform.
Yeah. And I think it is the best scene in the film.
It is good, isn't it? Yeah, it's a nice little twist. And suddenly, because there's this joy, rescue the child, then suddenly the vicar goes, wait a minute.
Suddenly they all realise, and everything changes from being... Because everyone's being friendly, and this is the weird thing about war, I suppose. We naturally are friendly to people who we meet as people, and suddenly finding that one of them is your enemy. And there's what I think is an even better scene later when Jean Marsh comes into the church. We'll cover that later.
Yeah. Well, another little funny bit is the gravedigger guy goes with more bloody foreigners, which is quite funny. He's just a very British sort of thing. Oh God, another thing to make the day a bit more difficult.
So anyway, now the English are rounded up and put into the church, and roadblocks are set up. People are allowed in, but they're not going to be allowed out.
So in the church, Jenny Agutter. Oh, now this is a key scene. Before that happened, she has shot and killed Arthur.
Oh God, how can we miss that?
Well, because it's another slightly silly scene, I think. Arthur has got into Devlin's home. Yeah. The home of the Marsh Warden, thank you. The home of the Marsh Warden, and has discovered. He thinks at best he's a black marketeer. Yeah. At worst, he's a Nazi.
Yeah. Well, he finds a German gun.
Yeah.
He finds Polish army trucks, but without numbers on yet.
Yeah, but stencils to put the numbers on. Yeah. So, and Jenny Agutter
says, "Don't tell."
Yeah, I love him, and shoots him with a shotgun.
Yeah.
Oh, blimey. Anyway, okay.
And that is the first. Well, actually, it's not the first death in the film, but it's the first of the main characters killing someone.
Yeah, but I mean, again, to me, this is a weakness of the film because it doesn't make sense. I mean, this is a girl who lives in that village. She's supposedly fallen in love with this Irish man in about 20 minutes.
Yes.
And kills for him.
Yes.
Even though she discovers he's possibly a Nazi. Just doesn't make sense. I can only think that has some mental problem.
Well, she's a teenager.
but that's what I think. I mean, okay, that you could perhaps use that excuse, but it's a terrible one.
Yeah,
because teenagers aren't like that.
It's
generally. I think it's possible. I can imagine this might not be in the book, but let's say in the book there's more time for their relationship to grow, and Devlin perhaps explains. Perhaps gives a bit of background about Ireland and how Britain's not the goodie. Yeah. The total goodie she thinks. And maybe there's some black and white and she gets a little bit confused about, him. So it's focused on him, not necessarily the Germans. Anyway. Okay,
if she were presented as slightly less intelligent, because she's slightly posh, being
Jenny Agutter.
Yeah. But if you had someone who didn't think of the political implications, where you feel as though she feels responsible. She's part of the women's auxiliary, service. Anyway, it is a difficult moment to sort of swallow.
It doesn't help the film.
But another thing is, she could have done it on an impulse. There's a gun nearby. He's about to leave.
Oh, certainly, yeah. And then she certainly regrets it and thinks, "Oh, what have I done?" Because we find her in the church. So the vicar's sister finds her in the church crying. Yeah. She's just about to go and get her brother. Yeah. When she opens the door, sees the Germans now revealed, the Polish now revealed as Germans, coming to the church with everyone. Says, "Quick, hide!" So they hide in a little ante-room, lock the door, and the vicar, noticing the door's locked and suspecting someone's in there, says aloud, "I know what you're here to do, and it won't work. You're here to kill Churchill." Yeah. Which, of course, he doesn't realise it's actually to kidnap Churchill. He just thinks they're here to assassinate him. Yeah. But, of course, did you notice this movie mistake when the sister escapes? So they've now got this information. Jenny Agutter is going to go and find Devlin. Yes. Even though you can see her like, but he's one of... Oh, okay. Yeah. And the sister is going to go and find Jean Marsh. So they're both going to traitors, so it's not going to help. But when she gets to Jean Marsh to tell her, she says, "They're going to kidnap Churchill."
Oh, does she?
This is where actually she doesn't know that. Yeah. She overheard that they're going to kill. And then that's a bit of a movie mistake, I think.
Yeah, I didn't notice that. So Pamela, the vicar's sister, goes to see Mrs. Gray, who shoots Pamela. Yes. But Pamela still manages to get away. And this is what I think is one of the best scenes. I mean, might be skipping ahead slightly. Mrs. Gray then comes... Miss Gray... No, she's Mrs. Gray because she's...
in the book, her husband, sister and parents were all killed by the British. Oh, right. But this is the thing that slightly stretched it, maybe, is I think her husband also died in the Boer War. Right. 40 years previously. So...
Anyway, so she comes to the church, just lays eyes on Michael Caine's character, comes up to him and says, "I've shot Pamela, I think I killed her, but she got away.
I think we're okay, yeah."
And then she realises that the rest of the village are there. And this is I think it's a brilliant moment, because she later says, she knew what she was doing, but it was never real to her that she'd have to leave this place. Yeah.
So, it's perhaps a bit of a game. Yeah. And then suddenly the reality of everyone seeing her for what she really is, and then realising what she really is, and I think.
She's lived with them all the time. It's not like she's a German soldier come in.
No. Yeah, you're right. It's a very good scene. And when she's leaving the church, she plays it very well, doesn't she? When she says that, you can see what she realises what she's losing. Yeah. This lovely village life, her friends turned out to be friends. And she turned out not to be. Yeah. So, but the sister does make it to the Americans. Yes. So the cat's out of the bag.
We're told that she's going to be okay.
Yeah.
And Larry Hagman's character. We've already seen him railing about the fact that he's about to be sent home.
It's a bit of an exposition. Yeah. He's sitting there going, "God damn it. God damn it, I'm going to be sent, I've never, all my training." Because he's, so in that sort of 2-minute soliloquy, we learn that he feels though he's been very wronged. He's got no combat experience. Yes. He really wants to prove himself. He's being sent back home, isn't he?
Yes, yeah. So he wants to prove himself as a soldier, but he's not going to. But now, here comes his opportunity. And because of it, he doesn't let the authorities know.
Yeah, Captain Tucker says, you've got to inform the War Office.
Yeah.
He says, if you don't do it, I will. And he says, oh, okay, I'll do it. So then Captain Tucker runs off and he says, cancel that call.
Yeah.
Those Poles you ran into are Krauts. Come here to kill Churchill. Now listen up. Churchill just left King's Lynn. I want you to
notify the War Office.
My God, you have any idea how long I'd be on that phone trying to make those fat-ass bastards at staff believe me? No, by God, I'm going to nail those Krauts myself, and I got the men to do it. Action this day. That's Churchill's personal motto. You know that?
I still think we should notify
Now, I want you to go and head off Churchill at the Walsingham Road.
If you don't notify the War Office, I will. Sir.
Moss, you get the hold of the War Office. Top priority. If anything happens to Churchill because you're late, this country's going to swing you from Big Ben by your balls. Cancel that call, Moss.
And he loads himself up with grenades. He's got his little, what are they, about 3 jeeps, and they've got a bazooka, and he says...
In a way that makes him like Himmler. You know, sorry, that sounds terrible, but in this film, not passing up information, acting on his own to grab the glory.
Right, yeah. It's also perhaps a little bit stereotypical American, the poor old Americans. I mean, maybe there's a bit of truth to this. I guess all the nationalities have got their negative stereotypical points. So he's the gung-ho American going in there, throwing bombs, and of course failing. So he decides to take on the paratroopers all by himself.
Although, and he does say, "Oh, we might be able to solve this without shooting a shot or whatever."
He does, which seems
grabs a white flag and walks right up to the church. I mean, why not?
Yeah. Perhaps just the force of his American charisma will sort the situation out.
He thinks, well, they know they're surrounded in a church. Surely they know they can't win, so surely they'll give up. Yeah. They don't.
So Larry Hagman he was slightly the bane of our childhood because a couple of years later, he played J.R. Ewing in Dallas. And, of course, our name is Ewing. Yes. And so even today, although it happens very rarely, but at that time, it used to be, what's your name? Oh, Ewing. Oh, JR. I mean, for years and years, and very occasionally now, but I don't get it that much. But before that, he played, he was in I Dream of Jeannie. The
sitcom,
Yeah, he was sort of the main guy in that. Yeah. But so he wasn't a big star in this film, I don't think. Yeah. But he played a few, he was famous for American television. Right. I played a few films, but it was Dallas that really sent him... rocketing into stardom,
more
wasn't
1980s.
Yeah. But that's that's the first battle scene. It's explosions, guns spitting bullets everywhere, and the Americans pretty much get slaughtered because they just. I mean, even one of his own men questions him, and he just drives in, and loads of them get killed.
They drive in. He thinks everyone is going to be in the church, when of course there are people outside who ambush them. Yeah. So there's a lot of people get killed. They bring out the bazooka. But, it's difficult. Now, at this point, I think it's difficult to tell what exactly happens next.
Well, I mean, the main thing is that Churchill's on his way, right?
Yes.
And Captain Tucker, who's played by, I think we should give him a mention, Treat Williams, he played a jogger in Marathon Man.
Oh, right.
Now, Marathon Man would have been a good film for this 10, because that's kind of a war film. It'd have been, it's sort of not. It's not actually,
it's a post-war film.
But it's got a connection. That's a fantastic film. And he was uncredited in The Empire Strikes Back as well.
Oh, really?
So this was, he went down a peg. Anyway, he intercepts Churchill's little group of cars coming in. Motorcade, good. And so stops them going in. And then they learn what Larry Hagman has done. In fact, there's quite a good line where one of Churchill's assistants... Captain Tucker says, he's a man, explaining to them, he's a man of limited combat experience. One of Churchill's assistants says, apparently no longer.
Yes. Now, Colonel Pitts, Larry Hagman, does survive with one private, and they go out to, I think they're looking for a telephone. Yeah. But they arrive at Mrs. Gray's house.
Who they know is a spy. Yes. Does he say something like, it's that bitch?
Yeah, it's that bitch Gray's house. And so he then decides to kill her. But
well, they're searching around the house. They don't know she's there.
No.
He goes up the stairs. There she is with a gun. She shoots him central in the forehead.
By which point he's already got out a grenade and picked out and taken out the pin.
Which follows him down the stairs, doesn't it?
And then blows up. Fortunately, there's a private there who finishes the job.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if he just sprays bullets going upstairs.
Yes, yeah.
Did he kill Marsh or did she shoot herself? I wasn't sure.
Right. Well, you see her leaning forward over her dressing table with a shattered mirror.
It's more likely she was shot by the soldier, wasn't it? Yeah. I'd have quite liked it if she'd have shot herself. It'd been more tragic for her character because she's got some. I think from what you say in that church scene, she's got a bit of a bit of colour behind her, and I think that would have been. Do you know she co-created Upstairs Downstairs?
Oh, really?
Yeah, and played one of the main characters in it. And she was married briefly to John Pertwee.
Yes, yeah.
You knew that.
She also appeared in Doctor Who with William Hartnell and Sylvester McCoy. Sort of two ends of the.
Oh right.
Yeah.
Okay. Not. Well, Hartnell was dead by then.
Yeah, not at the same time. Yeah.
So she happened to be in a Hartnell Doctor Who and a McCoy Doctor Who.
In a few Hartnell Doctor Who's actually. She was. I think she was the sister of the Lionheart, whatever his name is. I can't remember now. And she was also a space agent who got killed by the Daleks. So now the Americans proper engage the Germans.
Captain Clark goes into the church this time.
And immediately they know, this. Michael Caine says, unfortunately, this one seems to know what he's doing. How do they know that? But they do.
There's another great line where he tries to get them to surrender, saying, look, there's no point. And he says he's going to die doing his job.
Yeah.
And Captain Clark says there's no such thing as death with honour, just death, which I think was a brilliant line.
Yeah.
And how much does that apply to so many of these films where kind of honour is the thing that is more important than life to so many? And you kind of, there's some heroic deaths when things need to be done to stop evil people doing important things that would have helped them. But there's also so many deaths in these films where people die for honour that don't make that much difference. And so that I thought that line was very applicable to a lot of these situations.
But one thing Michael Caine's character does do is he lets the villagers go, which is sort of like an honourable thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
And then Devlin suddenly turns up at the church. I was thinking at the time, what's he doing there? Why does he just get away? But in fact, he's found a secret tunnel from the church to
the manor house.
The manor house. Yeah. So,
and of course, he's got a car. So the upshot of all that is Steiner's going to continue with the mission.
Yeah.
But But the rest of his men say they're going to stay to the bitter end, loyal to him and his mission to keep the diversion.
Yes. Yeah.
So they don't realise they've all gone.
So we've got this final dash for Churchill, as it were.
So off he goes with Devlin and his second in command, who's wounded.
Yeah.
And then there's another big battle scene, a bit more tactical from the Americans this time. End up throwing grenades into. I mean, this church really gets battered.
Yes, it does.
There's a lovely bit where, not lovely, because earlier we meet one of the Germans, and the way when they still think they're Polish, the way the vicar meets him is he hears his church organ being played beautifully.
Yes,
of course, arts and culture. Yes, and. At the end of this battle, that same soldier is slumped over the church organ with a sort of death chord.
So Michael Caine's character meets up with it's the German's boat, but it's a captured English boat.
Yeah, the E-boat comes because the tide's in, so it can get inland.
And so he unloads his wounded second in command on them and goes ahead on his own.
There's also a bit where Devlin is told he can get on the boat and goes, now, has he given up? He's going to change his ways because he says, no, off he goes, basically.
Yeah,
he seems to be abandoning the whole thing.
Yes. And does he meet up with Jenny Agutter's character?
Well, no, he doesn't. He's written her a letter and said goodbye to her.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
So he knows he's not seeing...
Don't they meet up again?
No.
Oh, you're right. Oh, well.
No, I don't think so.
If they did, it's not memorable.
No. At the end of the film, she's reading his letter
that's
on the sand dunes, and he's off with his two new dogs. Walking to freedom. I don't know.
Walking to Ireland, presumably.
I don't know if Devlin sort of has had some great realisation.
Yeah.
If he did, I missed it.
He's like the free spirit of the book, I suppose. So
yeah.
That's him walking
I
off
kind
into
of
the
want to read the
sunset.
book now to see, because I think there's a lot more to it.
But no, yeah.
Michael Caine is now sneaking around and learns over listening to... The American soldiers are everywhere because they know he's gone.
Yeah.
He overhears the fact that Churchill's being taken back to... I don't know if it's the main hall in the village or the American base. I think it's
it was the American base.
No, I think...
Oh, right.
Because I think they say the original target or whatever.
Right, yeah.
So being the hall in the village. So Caine overhears that, knocks out the American soldier, and is now dressed as an American soldier.
Yeah.
And gets through the gates just before the convoy comes.
Yes,
so he's in the grounds.
And then, so he sneaks around the back and takes off his American uniform, which is again the point of
principle.
honour. Yes, and we see Churchill wander out onto the veranda to have a cigar.
Before this happens, by the way, the E-boat has picked up and has sent a message back to Germany, which is all garbled, but basically they realise it's failed. Well, they think it has. It's all garbled, so they don't realise that Steiner's gone on to continue. They think it's over. Colonel Robert Duvall, is arrested, so Himmler basically washed his hands quickly. It had nothing to do with me. Radl is arrested and shot. Yeah,
for treason.
Yeah, within the space of a couple of minutes.
Yeah.
And that's the only emotion he shows, actually, is when he's arrested, he takes his gun out to give it to them and slams it down the table because he realises...
Well, he's been following... I think he's been following orders. He's been sticking to his duty.
Yes.
I mean, he did overstep his duty, but he did it for what he was seeing as the right reasons.
Yeah, so he's shot on the beach there in Alderney, I guess. Yeah, so back to...
Churchill. Yeah.
Well, they think it's all... They think they're safe, even though they know Steiner's still around somewhere.
Yeah.
So they completely... Even though Steiner's still around, Churchill is left on his own. He's happy with his brandy and cigars.
Yeah, wanders out.
This is, again, a little bit... It helps the plot rather than the veracity.
Yeah.
Churchill wanders out, opens the back doors, wanders out with his cigar and brandy. Oh, and there's Steiner. Okay, that's fine. A bit of luck. Goes up to him, shoots him.
Yeah.
Shocking.
Yeah.
It is shocking because you think, hang on, they shot Churchill.
And just before the people inside hear that Steiner's still about and an American soldier supposedly wanders in, so they realise what's happening.
They realise, and they hear this. They rush in just as he's shot. I think Churchill, he's only in it very briefly, but he's played very well. He turns around, he's got his cigar and his brandy. There's Michael Caine, and he sort of blinks at him like on the beaches, and just before he's shot. Of course, so this is the big twist.
Yes, cover your ears, listeners, if you haven't heard this. It's revealed that this isn't Churchill, but an actor.
Yes,
and that Churchill is actually
George Farmer, a
variety hall
actor.
Yes. And the real Churchill is actually off in a meeting with the Americans and Russians, which will be the key pact which finally puts paid to Hitler. Yeah,
Churchill, he says, I suppose, we can tell you now. Because, of course, Captain Clark, he's saying, but what, Churchill, what do you...
So we've all failed, yeah.
Churchill's dead. And they said, I suppose we can tell you now. You'll read about it in the papers tomorrow. This isn't Churchill. Yeah. This is, Churchill's in Tehran meeting Roosevelt and Stalin. Which, of course, was an actual meeting. They met a few times. And again, so they obviously put out this story that Churchill was going to Norfolk. So, because historically, at that meeting, it's very difficult to get Roosevelt, Stalin and Churchill together.
Yeah.
Churchill loved travelling. I mean, he went all over. I read his biography.
Oh, right.
Fascinating. Yeah. Absolutely fascinating. During World War One, he went over, he wanted to be in the thick of it. He really did. And I think during World War II, he was a real man of action. He was quite old by then. So he was happy to travel. Roosevelt was bound in a wheelchair.
Yeah.
And Stalin didn't like to travel at all. But anyway, so eventually getting them together was quite a job. And Stalin claimed, or the Russians claimed, that they foiled a plot to assassinate Churchill at that Tehran meeting. Right. But it's kind of thought that was probably propaganda, that it was put out, and I think that's, given their form, I think that's highly likely that they would say, we formed a plot to assassinate Churchill, just to make themselves look good, when actually there was probably no. But that's that gives some reflection on this story. You know,
Yes.
plots to assassinate Churchill.
Yeah.
I haven't really looked into how much of that might have been true or something that was contemplated. I don't think. I haven't seen much. But certainly that's at the Tehran conference.
Yeah.
That was something that was brought up. And, of course, they kill Steiner.
Yeah.
Unless you read the sequel,
Yes.
then he
Eagle
was
Explorer.
only injured.
Yeah, then he's taken to the Tower of London and rescued,
And I
apparently.
think Devlin has to go and rescue him. So they all come
Yes.
back.
Oh.
And it's Himmler is behind it.
Yes.
Okay, but I think this stands better on its own.
Yeah.
In the book, I don't think he kills Churchill, the double.
Oh, right.
I think he hesitates. He
Yeah.
confronts Churchill, hesitates, and then is shot by
Yeah.
a guard. So yes,
It's a good film.
nice film. It is.
I
It
think.
is an enjoyable film.
As you say, it falls apart when looked at too closely sometimes.
Yeah, I think the Devlin Jenny Agutter bit, the whole Devlin bit's a little bit, as you said, questionable. The Jenny Agutter is definitely kind of, I don't want to say ruins the film, but it certainly makes it confusing, and she could be done away with. The character, she don't need to be in the film.
Yeah.
Unless they'd have done it properly. It could have been. It could have been done better, couldn't
Yeah.
it? Maybe that's part of the rush that Sturgis didn't really give much attention to because he wasn't that interested. I don't know.
The thing that I thought was interesting about this film is that you've got a lot of people who are being traitors or doing things that the viewer won't agree with, but we're made to identify with some. Like we identify with Steiner, even though he's trying to kill Hitler, Churchill.
Yeah.
We sort of identify with Molly, really, but she actually kills one of her fellow Englishmen.
Yeah.
We identify with Devlin, even though he's helping the Germans.
Do you know that actually that's another thing I read? I think in the book, Arthur may have attempted to rape her, which would, if that was played up a bit more, would certainly give a lot more
Personal
motivation.
motive.
Yeah.
But then we've also got some people who are following similar motives, but we're against, like Colonel Pitts does what he does for glory, and of course gets killed. But we're never invited to feel as though he's a hero.
No.
And Mrs. Grey, we know she's doing what she's doing for revenge, so we never feel like we're on her side, even though she's helping Michael Caine, who we are on his side.
Yes, it's interesting, isn't it? The
way we're
who you're rooting for.
Yeah.
And you find yourself rooting for the Germans to some degree, but then also rooting for the British if you happen to be a British. Or probably most modern viewers would view for the who you might consider morally right, which would I think in most cases be the British.
It seems
side.
to break down to me, although this isn't quite right, that people who have a personal motive or are doing things for actual people, like Michael Caine's character is doing it for his men.
Yes.
You get behind them, but people who are doing something for glory or for some sort of abstract motive, you're not behind them.
Right.
I mean, it doesn't work with Mrs. Grey because she's doing it for revenge about her family, but because we don't see her family, you don't really think of that. So
although she, I think, as you said, she's a very interesting character in this.
Yeah.
One of the better aspects of the story. I just wanted to say, just a quick nod. I thought the music was really good.
Oh, right.
Really good. Perhaps even a little bit too grand. I mean, at the beginning, we're flying over snowy mountains. You think, hang on, is this Where Eagles Dare?
Lalo Schifrin.
Yeah. He did music for Enter the Dragon and also famously wrote the music for Mission Impossible, which is obviously most people know.
Also, he wrote all the Dirty Harry music.
Right.
And apparently he did a score for The Exorcist, which was thrown out and was replaced by Mike Oldfield's...
Right. I was interested to look as well at whether Churchill actually did have any doubles.
Oh, right.
And I couldn't find any information on that, so it doesn't mean there weren't, but I don't think there were.
Yeah.
There's some people who think someone impersonated his voice on a few speeches.
Oh, yes.
But that seems doubtful. It was quite a famous actor. And he did re-record a couple of Churchill speeches after the war or later in the war, but that's kind of known. Oh, yeah. So I don't think he generally did. I think Montgomery was more famous for having
I was Monty's double.
Right,
Is
yes.
that a film or
or a book or maybe,
yeah.
So he's well known for having a double. Okay, so that's the end of this War Films podcast episode.
Yes.
I think, I'd say overall, very enjoyable film. You've got to ignore a couple of aspects, but a good old adventure film. I have read some reviews that people say it doesn't stand up, and I think perhaps it's not worthy to be in a top 10 quite.
Yeah.
I really like the premise. I think if maybe perhaps if the film had been, if the
Little
book had
tighter,
been more
yeah.
authentically filmed,
Yeah.
that might be better.
I think it falls into the classic category for me, basically because I've seen it so many times.
Yeah. Well, it's got that really good cast
Yeah,
of
yes,
1960s,
that's true.
70s. Yeah, those
Actors,
great
yeah.
British actors. The ones playing Germans.
And Americans.
Yeah. And it's a really good sort of mission adventure film.
Yeah.
From that aspect, it's great.
Yeah.
Really enjoyable. Okay, so we're going to actually meet Hitler next. We're going into the Wolf's Lair. Well, into the bunker actually, because we're going to do Downfall.
Our most modern
2004.
film.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Now this is going to be interesting. I've only seen it once before, but I really enjoyed it, and I think I've mainly put it in this top 10 because I just think it brings such a different aspect.
Yes, yeah.
So it's not really the adventure category.
Yeah.
Perhaps a bit more the political. Anyway, we'll see. We'll talk about that
Yes.
when we get to that. So thank you very much for listening. Hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you for the next War Films podcast in hopefully about a month's time.
Yes. Bye.